Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rod Davison, and I'm going to be your presenter today. We are going to be beginning this session right now. You are in the Artificial Intelligence for Business webinar, and I'll just cover a couple of basics before we begin. This is a presentation by Elephant Scale, who are experts in modern IT technology of the kind that we're going to be talking about in the webinar today. So the webinar is planned to run about 25 minutes. That'll be enough time for me to do a high-level presentation of some of these topics. And then what we're going to be doing is also having about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A at the end of the presentation. Now, I'm going to ask that you hold your questions until the Q&A period, but you can put them into the Q&A module or Q&A facility in your interface if you want, and I'll check those when I get to the Q&A period. All right, so I do encourage questions. This is a topic I really enjoy talking about, so I'd love to hear what you'd like to, what else you'd like to know about. Anyway, a little bit about myself. Like I said, my name is Rod Davison. I started into AI actually in the last big AI wave in the 1980s. I managed several development projects developing prototype AI systems for machine translation and some of the machine learning at the time. And since that time, after that kind of surge of AI kind of died out, I wound up doing a lot of other things, including a lot of consulting and training work, across a wide range of industries in a number of different dimensions of the software world, from the business side to the implementation side. And I got a chance to go into a lot of very, very interesting organizations, from Wall Street to defense contractors. And although I wasn't the smartest person in the room, I did get a chance to see the smartest people in the room in action, which impressed me quite a bit. So hopefully I can pass on some of that information. I've also worked extensively in market research and in helping people develop strategic plans for implementing changes from both the technological and social aspect. So I hope that what you'll do, I hope you'll find this interesting. I'm going to enjoy doing it. So grab a hold and let's get started. So artificial intelligence for business, what does that actually mean? Well, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be saying, what exactly is AI? It's one of those terms that everybody thinks they know what it means. When you ask them to define it, they kind of hem and haw a lot. So we're going to try and cover that from a business perspective as to what exactly this is all about without getting into the technical details. We'll also talk about the AI hype and mythology. And this is the thing that we seem to have to counter all the time, from the wide range of media articles, ranging everything from terror about the rise of the killer robots to the idea that AI systems are going to put everybody out of work and the entire economy will be run by autonomous AI systems. So there's a lot of hype and mythology out there. We want to kind of dispense with that fairly quickly and look at what AI is actually doing. Where is it actually successful? And the interesting thing about AI success stories is that the places AI is most successful, nobody knows that it's AI behind the scenes driving that success. We'll talk about AI adoption in business, where the trends are going, and we'll also talk about developing an AI business strategy. So what does it mean for a modern organization living in the world or in the age of AI? What do they have to look at going forward? All right, so the moment here. There we go. So got my mouse here. There we go. So let's talk about what artificial intelligence is. We're not going to get into a technical technical description, but we are going to look at one of the fairly standard models that is used in the AI community to kind of figure out what things AI does. On the left-hand side of that diagram there, we have what we call human-centered or human-like AI. And these are attempts up in the top left corner for cognition to try to develop systems that think like humans. We're trying to emulate human thought processes. Neural networks was an early attempt to do that, but after a while we realized we can't do that with the neural networks, but we found neural networks could do a lot of other really cool stuff. So we didn't pursue that. A lot of these are trying to do things like define what do we mean by intelligence? Can computers write poetry and compose music? Can computers understand emotion? Those are all the kinds of problems that are really, really interesting in cognitive science, but we don't really have any applications for those right now, but that's kind of an area of ongoing research. Down at the bottom left-hand corner, we have those idea of systems that can interact with people as if they were humans. And we, a lot of people talk about human-machine interfaces, and you'll have robot best friends and companions, and we're not doing too well on that area either. There's so much complexity in the way of humans interact that we're decades probably away from anything that beyond a very limited scope could be successful. But it's the stuff on the right that's really interesting to us, because we throw away the idea on the right that you have to be like a human to do the same kinds of things that humans do. So we've got things like machine learning, expert systems, data analysis and modeling, pattern recognition, speech recognition. And we say these are systems that reason rationally. In other words, they may not think the way we think, but they can come up with solutions that are comparable to the kinds of solutions we come up with. So we went from early systems that could play chess just by blindly trying all possible combinations to systems that can win at Go and win at Jeopardy by doing a kind of analysis that works, even if it's not the same kind of analysis that you would do. We also have systems that act rationally in the sense that they do the kinds of things that we can do, but they don't necessarily do it the same way. And these are robots, task automations, human-machine interfaces, and a whole bunch of other sort of related technologies. So the idea here is that on those columns on the left, what we call artificial general intelligence or general artificial intelligence, which basically says we're going to create an intelligent machine, okay? We're not doing too good on that. Like I said, decades away. But it's the stuff on the right is where we're having our most success. This is intelligence and performance augmentation. This is where we use AI to enhance or increase the capability of a person to approach a complex problem or situation or a task and derive solutions or accomplish the task. And that picture, by the way, down there is of a young woman who is a quadriplegic who, with the use of AI, is able to use an exoskeleton to walk again. That's typically what we talk about by human-centered AI. And so what we're looking at now in terms of the real status of the AI is that while the science fiction and all these other kinds of media presentations of AI talk about what's on the left because it's cool, it's scary, it's not really where AI is. Not now, anyway. Maybe in the future, but not now. But where AI is really having its successes right now is in this right-hand side, the human augmentation or human task augmentation. And that's why we're seeing an explosion of things like machine learning systems and expert systems and data analysis and modeling, because they work. We have the technology to enable that to work. So that's where we want to make that distinction. So that's where we're sort of following along Steve Jobs' great observation in which he said the Condor uses less energy per kilometer than to move a kilometer. A Condor uses the least energy to move a kilometer, get that right. But humans come in with a rather unimpressive showing compared to other animals until you put them on a bicycle. Once you got a human on a bicycle, they blow the Condor away, completely off the top of the charts. And the idea here is that the computer, he called it a computer, but I'm going to say AI is the most remarkable tool we've come up with. It's the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds. And that's an analogy we're going to hear a lot in the AI community, is that AI is a bicycle for the brain. It takes what we want to do and gives us the power intellectually or analytically in the same way that a bicycle magnifies our physical abilities. Okay, that's always a great analogy to keep in mind. Okay, so let's cut through some of the hype and some of the fear-mongering that goes on with AI. And this is, again, comes back to the idea that public perception, and if you go and look at popular articles on AI, is that always focuses on this human-like AI. And if you ask a lot of people what AI is like, they'll produce some kind of image like you see on the screen. They'll say, oh, Terminator, or something like that. But this is not where AI actually is in reality. The problem with this kind of view of AI is that we also tend to have people talk about it as a magic solution. We'll get rid of middle managers and replace them with machine learning systems that'll make decisions that middle managers could make. No, that's not going to happen, because decisions, while you look at decisions that are made, in a course of a business. There may be a large percentage of them that are routine, but there's always the decisions that need a quality of human intellect that we cannot yet emulate in automated systems. So they're not magic solutions. Again, just like bicycles don't go out and do things on themselves, but they really help you get things done when you use the bicycle. It's also demonized unrealistically. Again, talking about the rise of the killer robots and how AI is going to destroy the economy. And I keep hearing these seminars by people talking about, have we created our new masters and will AI take over the world? You know, if they watch the Terminator series and Skynet and all of that. Again, it's unrealistic. It's divorced from reality. And what that does is it makes us blind to what AI really is. And that's what we want to focus on for just a few minutes here. So let's go back here. So remember, all that stuff, the hype is over here and here on the left-hand side, but the stuff that works is on the right-hand side. Okay, now the other thing that we want to point out is a lot of this hype comes from people who take AI technology and use it badly. And this is a great comment by Grady Bush. A fool with a tool is still a fool. If you're doing something stupid and you use AI to do it faster and better, it's still stupid. So this is where we get a lot of bad press in AI, and you can take a couple of one of the examples that I just beat my head over the wall with, against the wall with, is face recognition. Facial recognition as a technology works very, very well, but when you deploy it without the proper consideration that you would deploy any technology in terms of quality and do the analysis and do the kinds of setting standards and understanding exactly what it's supposed to do, of course, it's not going to work. So we have a couple of these examples where the New York Transit Authority deployed facial recognition to look for people. I'm not sure exactly what the original business objectives were, but after their first test, they had a 0% success rate. And they said, okay, 0 success rate, so we're just going to do more of it. Instead of stopping and saying, why are we getting a 0% success rate when we deploy this out into the real world? In England, they have a similar kind of situation where they deploy facial recognition on the CCT systems, and they get a 96% failure rate, meaning that 96% of the people they identified as criminals weren't. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, but it's not the facial recognition technology. It is, they trained them on weird data sets. For example, the British one was trained on male white faces and misidentified people who were either minorities or not male. Well, that starts to stand to reason. You didn't do the adequate quality control and quality analysis. You didn't run the pilots. You didn't see how to implement it. What are the issues in implementation? As the great American philosopher Yogi Berra said, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice. But in practice, the two are nothing alike. And this is what people are learning as they go and deploy the technology. And then it fails. So what is the conclusion everybody jumps to? AI doesn't work. In fact, it even has the effect of starting to affect a policy by people who has a growing backlash against facial technology. And again, we come back to the idea, it's not the AI that's the problem here. It's not the machine learning. The problem is how people are deploying it and how people are using it. You can take any tool that works really well, and if you deploy it in an inefficient and ineffective manner, of course you're going to wind up with a disaster. We go back to the idea, fool with a tool is still a fool. So it's the fools that are often giving us kind of the bad impression of AI rather than the tool itself. Okay, so what is artificial intelligence really when it comes to business? You know, if we throw all that stuff out, what are we left with? Well, we come back to the idea that these are bicycles for the brain. These are tools that improve, enhance, and extend our capability to do intellectual work. In the same way that robotics improved, extended, and enhanced our way to do manual work, artificial intelligence applies the same idea to intellectual work. And so what we tend to find is places where AI is doing very well. Here's an example in Queensland, Australia, in which they're trying to protect this electrical grid in this massive wasteland. And they're able to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to analyze photographs and usage patterns to be able to predict where equipment failures might be able to occur. And it becomes a vastly more efficient way to identify threats. They use a combination of LiDAR, high-resolution aerial photography to create 3D maps, and then they use machine learning to identify points on the network that have failed or at risk of failure, because they're standardized ways of doing that, and they can do more of it and they can do it better. Plus, they can find patterns they might have missed earlier. So there's one example of it. Another example is in biology. The Human Genome Project and global diversity are able to, a lot of our advances in genetics are because of artificial intelligence, machine learning. They enable us to do this incredibly detailed, complex computation in a very, very efficient way. And so we've made all kinds of incredible breakthroughs. Well, we haven't. Whoever does this has. I'm not part of it. But that field has made incredible breakthroughs because they've got these tools that enable them to handle this intellectually complicated task. In other words, another bicycle for the brain. Another example, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. I've actually taught a couple courses to these guys, and they have an interesting situation because they're trying to find things like money laundering, who's engaged in money laundering and where it is. The problem they have is that you can't just look for patterns in transfers because people are trying to hide what they do. So it's almost like a chess game. Well, this is where machine learning comes in again. Machine learning enables people to extend their ability to analyze patterns and find patterns through things like data mining, which is related to machine learning as part of artificial intelligence, to look for ways, patterns that are suggestive of money laundering. So this is a place where they're doing very, very well with machine learning and are able to catch more bad guys than they certainly could have without machine learning and artificial intelligence. And again, here's one of my favorites. This is in India, diabetic retinopathy affects 126 million diabetics and accounts for blindness. And the problem is that in India, there were so many people that had to be diagnosed. India is home to 62 million diabetics, many of whom live in rural areas. Timely screening for changes can help them to get treatment for the loss. The problem is that there were so many retinal images that had to be looked at, is that the workload just bogged down and people's vision and health were at risk. By using artificial intelligence and machine learning, they were able to sort through these images and prioritize them so they could allocate the actual skilled technicians to look at the highest priority cases. They got rid of all of that kind of grunt level work that was holding up the whole process. Those are just a couple of quick examples. In a certain sense, when we talk about AI nowadays, it's the real AI that does the work in business is the man behind the curtain. We don't see it. We see the results of it. And because of that, nobody really realizes that it is driving force behind what's being done. See, AI is everywhere, but most people don't know the AI is there. And that's good, because if the AI, nobody knows about the AI that is doing the work, that means it's doing the work correctly, unlike those kind of very public facial recognition fiascos. Successful AI doesn't replace anything. What it does is it optimizes and it expands. It improves your capabilities. It enhances your abilities. It extends the range of things that you can do. But it never really is successful when it just out and out replaces something, because now you're trying to get it to push into that human-like area. And that right now, we don't have the capability to do it. So most people encounter AI every day, but they just don't know it. So, for example, Uber Eats uses a lot of people use Uber Eats every day. But what they don't know is that the whole back end, the technological back end of Uber Eats is driven by AI and machine learning. It's all in the background. That's how they become competitive. That's how they're able to improve their quality, their service. That's how they're able to do resource provisioning, figuring out what resources are going to be needed, become much more efficient, dynamic pricing, intelligent spending. Also managing the infrastructure becomes possible through the use of AI supplementing capabilities in the back end. Similarly, Airbnb also uses AI in the back end to be able to manage and coordinate its particular business as well. I would make the case that Airbnb and Uber Eats would not be as successful without AI, because they would have a very reduced capability to respond to the demands of their customers and changes in the marketplace, particularly on a day-to-day basis. So what we do see is AI growing at a phenomenal rate because of these behind-the-scenes bicycle for the brains sort of approach. The AI and machine learning spending, as you can look there, estimated is going to be increasing from 12 billion to about 57.6 billion in 2021. I suspect that might be a little bit low in terms of an estimate, but people are not going to be putting that kind of investment in there if the projects that already have been done haven't proved themselves to be worthwhile. For example, in the 80s, we lost out on a lot of being able to implement AI in business simply because we didn't have the computing power to be able to do AI. Now we do. That's no longer a barrier. So now we're seeing a much more rapid adoption of AI because companies have the ability at relatively reasonable costs to implement AI and machine learning systems that do a lot of this work. Well, what kinds of things are we seeing happening in this AI world? Well, for example, I was just reading a review of some law firms in which they said one of the big intellectual grunt tasks they have is writing boilerplate contracts. Get a bunch of interns, or I'm not sure what they call them. I guess they're called interns, and they sit down and they basically write page after page of boilerplate contract. And so you've got these lawyers spending up a lot of human capital doing that. But AI systems can actually learn how to write boilerplate contracts. Now, they can't write and come up with creative, specialized contracts, but what you can do is take all those people that used to write those boilerplate contracts and you can move them into other places where their human analytical skills are going to be of much more value and bring a greater return to the company than having them sitting there writing boilerplate contracts. You're going to see as you look in these organizations, where is the cost benefit? It's because we're freeing up human capital and intellectual resources from grunt tasks, from routine, rote intellectual tasks, and moving it into places where we can utilize human capabilities in a much, much more effective manner. We're freeing up human capital. In some cases, that means you don't need as many people. On the other hand, that also means that you can have better leverage more effectively the use of the people that you already have. So we are seeing a number of other patterns. Here's some estimated growth in revenues from artificial intelligence from enterprise applications from Statistica. And you can see, again, we're looking at a fairly exponential curve. Now, what this means for the average business is that everybody is going AI. In other words, we're seeing it throughout various market segments. It is becoming part of the corporate environment that people are working with. From a competitive point of view, that means that most companies cannot afford to kind of turn a blind eye to what's happening in their marketplace with AI. I worked for a company back in the 1990s, and in about 1993, they said this internet thingy is never really going to take off. We're not going to invest in any kind of internet technology. We're going to stick with the old stuff. And within about 6 months, they were out of business. You ignore these trends in the marketplace at your own peril. We also notice that people have a lot of reasons for adopting AI, and I think this is a very interesting slide. Number one, AI will allow us to obtain or sustain a competitive advantage, allow us to move into new businesses. New organizations are going to come up that are competitive. They're going to be using AI. Our existing competitors are going to use AI. We're going to be forced on costs. People who use AI to automate those intellectually routine tasks are generally going to going to be able to control their costs more effectively. Suppliers often AI-driven products and services. If our supply chain both upstream and downstream, are heavily committed to AI. We kind of got to get in sync with them. And customers are also going to start expecting various AI kinds of offerings. Like if you're running a travel agency, they're going to expect very sophisticated travel planning types of tools to be made available. Okay, so that's gives most companies, looking at the reality of the marketplace, we come down to this critical point. What do you do? Where do you go with this? Now, I have watched many companies implement AI successfully. I've watched many more implement it in a totally chaotic and disastrous manner. And like I said, I'm never the smartest guy in the room, but I get to see what the smartest guys in the room do a lot of times. And so this is where I'm going to kind of put out this kind of little roadmap for success. The first point that you want to do is to understand exactly what the AI technologies are and how you can use them to automate your task. In other words, what are specifically the technologies that can become your corporate brain bicycles? I mean, this gets away from the hype and gets away from all of the scaremongering, all the magic bullet solutions, and comes back to the reality of the situation. What actually can this AI technology do in a field that's related to your organization? Or how do other people in your industry, how are they using AI? What are the technologies they're using? How are they deploying it? So you have to know what these technologies are from a realistic and practical point of view. The second thing you have to know is know in your business where you have the candidates for work that can be done by AI or can benefit from AI. It's not good enough just to throw it out there. So for example, Google went and I think it was Amazon, went and put a job approval system in place and said, we've got this great AI system and it's going to machine learning. It's going to go through all these resumes. It's going to pop out the top 5 resumes. And those are the guys we're going to hire. But they didn't think about the business and to say, well, what do we mean by the top 5? It might be the gut feeling of interviewers who've been interviewing people for thousands of years, or not thousands of years, sorry, dozens of years. Wow. And they also discovered that this recommendation system for resumes, trying to predict where the top resumes are, was very misogynistic. It didn't like women. And part of the reason for that was because it went based on historical hiring patterns, which tended to favor men. So in other words, that part of the business, because of a lot of reasons about what AI could and couldn't do, was the wrong place to implement an AI solution. There were better places, and they have got better places where they have AI solutions, but it's partly of what the organization knows about what tasks are eligible or are candidates to become bicycleized, shall we say. The third thing is to have an AI implementation plan. You don't want to just go and buy AI and throw it in there. You have to sit down and think about how you're going to transition from the current work environment into an environment that supports AI. And that means a good understanding of how you're going to roll that out, how you're going to actually get the AI up and running, how are you going to test it, how are you going to ensure the quality, how are you going to ensure consistency. So you have to have that part of it. The third thing is you need to develop an in-house expertise for AI. It has to become part of the corporate culture, at least the basic concepts, and you have to have people in the organization who are experts in those areas. Just like you have people in your organization who are experts in databases and experts in networking, this becomes a need for having corporate skill development in order that people can in-house work with AI properly and also can liaise with people outside the organization who are the real experts. And the other thing is numbers. You've got to constantly be tracking results to see how you're doing with AI. So the idea behind all of this, and we are at the end of my presentation period, is that number one, ignore the hype about AI. AI is actually working very, very well, but it's always working behind the scenes. The kind of AI that works is the AI that is like robotics for manual labor. It's the automation of routine, ordinary intellectual tasks that burn up human capital and can be automated by a machine learning or some other kind of system. The critical success points are understand your organization and where you should be able to apply AI And number two, understand the AI technologies themselves. And of course, on that question, if you need to get some direction in understanding AI technologies, then you should be contacting some of our people here at Elephant Scale, and they'll be able to sit down with you and have a chat about what you can do to develop that understanding of how AI works and how it would work in your organization. And the other thing too is understanding your business. I think I said this: understanding your business, where you can apply this, and then sit down with a plan. Understand the technology, understand the opportunity, and then develop a plan to marry the two up. All right, now what I'm going to do is I have reached my quota here. Let me take a look at one of the questions that came through from Hussam. He says, how successful is AI image recognition in the retail space, particularly in the areas of recognizing out-of-stock situations, planogram compliance, product shelf share? Actually, from what I've seen, it's been pretty successful. Again, it's a matter of how it's deployed. Because this is, again, the kind of thing that lends itself very well to artificial intelligence and machine learning. Image recognition in particular, the ability to where image recognition fails often is where you stick it into novel situations and say identify the animals in the picture. But when it's working in a relatively closed environment like a warehouse or a stocking environment in which it's not going to be looking for alligators and other things, it's just is going to be looking for things it knows about or can be trained on, then your success rate goes very high. So I think Amazon is already working with this, and they've combined it with robotics so that you do have robotics which work very well in some of these places, basically to wander around and collect the information and then do the analysis and produce reports back to people about situations of stocking and that sort of thing. In terms of the rest of the retail space, AI has been very successful in terms of recommendation systems, helping people choose solutions with multiple alternatives, like in travel agencies, designing cars for themselves, real estate, finding real estate that meets their needs, or at least allows them to develop potential lists of potentials that work. So there's a lot of these areas where we really have done this successfully, and that field continues to grow. Okay, I hope that answers your question. All right, any other questions? If you have, please feel free to pop them into the chat window or the Q&A. And if not, then I think what we can do is I'll wait a few more minutes. So I hope you guys found that useful, and I'm going to encourage you to follow up with the folks at Elephant Scale who reach out to you, and you can talk to more about it. But I hope this was helpful to clarify, demystify, and giving you a little bit of an overall perspective on artificial intelligence. It is now at our termination time, so I do thank you all very, very much for your kind attendance. And I'm going to wish you all a good day, and I'll stay around for about another 3 or 4 minutes if anybody does have any questions before I end the session. Thank you all very much. Okay, we've got a question here. If you were going to coach or mentor new students in the field of AI, what technologies and subject areas do you think would be most valuable to focus on? I think at this particular point, the area that is showing the most benefit and is the one they should focus on is in the machine learning area. The use of both big data and machine learning technologies are very definitely the growth areas, at least we're looking at in the short term. So if they were coaching new students and mentoring new students, and I particularly was coaching them to look for things that were marketable for them, I would say definitely you want to work on machine learning, which covers things like vision, image recognition, text processing, and AI scheduling. All right, folks, gonna shut her down now. So thank you all very much.